continuing our exploration of the Quran, the holy book and final divine message of Muslims. In the previous chapter, we obtained a symbolic image resembling the Arabic writing of the word Allah by using the numerical values of the verses in the Quran. In this chapter, we will investigate whether the golden ratio, widely used in nature, is present in the Quran. Calculating the golden ratio. There are several ways to calculate the golden ratio. One common method is to divide a line segment into two parts so that the ratio of the longer part to the whole is equal to the ratio of the whole to the shorter part. This can be expressed mathematically as A/B equals A plus B/A, where A is the length of the longer part and B is the length of the shorter part. The golden ratio. The golden ratio, also known as the divine proportion or the Greek letter phi, is an irrational number approximately equal to 1.618. It is often associated with aesthetics and is said to be the most pleasing proportion to the human eye. The golden ratio in art and nature. The golden ratio has been used by artists and architects for centuries, and it is often said to be the most aesthetically pleasing proportion. It can be found in many famous works of art, such as the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci and the Parthenon in Athens. The golden ratio is also found in many forms in nature, such as the spiral patterns of seashells and sunflowers. This has led some people to believe that the golden ratio is a universal principle that governs the beauty and harmony of the universe. Properties of the golden ratio. The golden ratio has several interesting properties. For example, it is the only number that is equal to both its square and its reciprocal. Phi(2) equals phi, 1/phi equals phi. The golden ratio is also closely related to the Fibonacci sequence, a series of numbers in which each number is the sum of the two preceding ones. The ratio of successive Fibonacci numbers approaches the golden ratio as the numbers get larger. Applications of the golden ratio. The golden ratio has been used in a wide variety of fields, including art, architecture, design, and mathematics. It is also used in some financial markets and trading algorithms. Early discoveries and uses. The golden ratio was first discovered by the Pythagoreans in the 5th century BC. They recognized its mathematical properties and its applications in geometry. Ancient Egyptians and Greeks used the golden ratio in the design of pyramids, temples, and sculptures. Renaissance and modern art. During the Renaissance, the golden ratio gained renewed interest among artists and architects. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael are all known to have used the golden ratio in their works. For example, the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci is said to be composed according to the golden ratio. The golden ratio continued to be used by artists and designers throughout the centuries. In the 20th century, it was particularly popular among Art Deco and modernist artists. Conclusion. The golden ratio, with its unique mathematical properties and aesthetic appeal, has captivated mathematicians, artists, and architects for centuries. Its presence in both nature and human creations continues to inspire and intrigue. Embark on a journey through the Quran to uncover the hidden presence of the golden ratio within this divine book. Our exploration begins from the end, delving into the final surahs to decipher the traces of the golden ratio. Our quest is to locate the numerical sequence 1.618, the embodiment of the golden ratio, embedded within the pages of the Quran. Nas Surah, the 114th and final chapter of the Quran, transforms into the first surah when approached from the end. Similarly, Surah Kafirun, the 109th surah, becomes the sixth when viewed from the reverse order. Our final destination on this numerical odyssey is Surah Al-Qadr, the 18th surah. When approached from the end, it ascends to the 18th position. But is this a mere coincidence? Or is there a deliberate connection to the golden ratio of 1.618? If the Quran is indeed a divine book, it is highly probable that it harbors intricate codes. As a researcher of mysteries, I have uncovered an intriguing connection within the sequence of these surahs. 1. Surah Nas 6. Surah Kafirun 18. Surah Al-Qadr. Does this numerical sequence align perfectly with the golden ratio, or is it merely a product of chance? The answer to this question remains shrouded in mystery. Let's consider Nas Surah based on the number of verses, designating it as the first surah from the end, giving it a value of 1. Moving on to Surah Kafran, we find that it is the 6th surah and consists of 6 verses. An intriguing observation emerges here: while the value of the surah is used in Nas Surah, the number of verses is used in Surah Kafran. This suggests a decrease from large to small, adhering to a specific pattern. It seems that first the surahs and then the number of verses were considered. So, what kind of code does Surah Al-Qadr present to us? The 18th surah, Surah Al-Qadr, consists of 5 verses. According to our symbolic proportional reduction theory, the value of the surah was used in Nas Surah, and the number of verses was used in Surah Kafran. In this case, a study should have been conducted at the letter level in Surah Al-Qadr. Indeed, our examination reveals that the 5th verse, the last verse of Surah Al-Qadr, consists of 18 letters. This points to a perfectly implemented golden ratio. Conclusion: unveiling the mystery of the golden ratio in the Quran. In our quest to uncover the presence of the golden ratio, 1.618, within the Quran, we employed a reverse chronological approach. By examining the first surah, Nas, from the end, the 6th surah, Kafran, from the end, and the 18th surah, Al-Qadr, from the end, we successfully derived the numerical sequence 1.618. However, to eliminate the possibility of coincidence, we further verified our findings. This verification process revealed that the first surah, Nas, has a value of 1 when considered from the end. The 6th surah, Kafran, consists of 6 verses, and the final verse of the 18th surah, Al-Qadr, comprises 18 letters. This pattern, progressing from large to small, suggests a highly organized and intentional arrangement. The alignment of surah, verse, and letter counts in this sequence makes it highly improbable to be a mere coincidence. Our exploration of the golden ratio in the Quran continues. Given the vastness of this divine book, it is highly probable that multiple instances of the golden ratio lie hidden within its pages. Therefore, we shall persist in our investigation. This time, we will examine the Quran from the beginning, seeking instances where the golden ratio is employed. We now know what we are looking for: 1.618, the golden ratio. Could the golden ratio be concealed within the first surahs of the Quran? Let's begin by examining the first surah, Fatiha. Including the Basmala, it consists of 7 verses. Next, we move on to the 6th surah, An'am, which comprises 166 verses. Finally, we consider the 18th surah, Al-Kahf, consisting of 110 verses. Earlier, our reverse chronological analysis revealed the number 1.618 using a different encryption method. Now, we are examining the Quran from a forward chronological perspective. So, what mystery does the golden ratio hold within the 1st, 6th, and 18th surahs? We will continue our investigation to unravel this enigma. Detailed analysis, unveiling the golden ratio in the Quran. Our in-depth investigation revealed an intriguing pattern in 3 surahs. 1. The first verse of Surah Fatiha begins with Alhamdulillah. 2. The first verse of Surah Al-Baqarah begins with Alif Lam Ra. 3. The first verse of Surah Al-Imran begins with Alif Lam Mim. 4. The first verse of Surah An-Nisa begins with Ya Ayyuhan Nisa. 5. The first verse of Surah Al-Ma'idah begins with Ya Ayyuhallazina Amanu. 6. The first verse of Surah Al-An'am begins with Alhamdulillah. 7. The first verse of Surah Al-Araf begins with Alif Lam Ra. With the exception of these surahs, other surahs begin with different forms of address. However, when we reach the 18th surah, Surah Al-Kahf, we encounter a surprising phenomenon. The first verse of this surah also begins with Alhamdulillah. When we look at the surahs following this one, we observe that most of them begin with different forms of address. Summary and continued investigation: the golden ratio in the Quran. In summary, we observe that the first verse of Surah Fatiha begins with Alhamdulillah. The first verse of Surah Al-An'am also begins with Alhamdulillah. And surprisingly, the first verse of Surah Al-Kahf also begins with Alhamdulillah. Between these surahs, and following Surah Al-Kahf, no other surahs begin with the word Alhamdulillah until the 34th and 35th surahs. This presents a visual feast in the Quran to demonstrate the golden ratio. We also witnessed the golden ratio in a different encryption method when we examined the Quran from the beginning. Let's continue our investigation into the golden ratio. Will we encounter a different encryption method? The mystery hunter continues the search. Continued investigation. Let's apply the golden ratio concept to the entirety of the Quran. Has the golden ratio been implemented throughout the book's 114 surahs? If so, how and with what kind of encryption method has it been applied? Let's continue our examination. The Quran is the final testament, consisting of 114 surahs. What is our golden ratio? 1.618. Let's divide the number of surahs, 114, by 1.618 and see if the golden ratio is encoded in the book. Unveiling the golden ratio in the Quran. The presence of the golden ratio in the Quran. When we divide the number 114 by 1.618, we obtain the result 70.457354. Starting to count the verses of the Quran from the beginning, we see that the 70th surah is Ma'arij. This surah consists of 45 verses, including the Basmala. While some sources indicate that this surah consists of 44 verses, the number 45 is reached when we include the Basmala. As a result, when we divide the 114 surahs in the Quran by 1.618, we find that the resulting number, approximately 70.45, corresponds to the 70th surah, Ma'arij, which consists of 45 verses with the Basmala. This can be interpreted as a code indicating the presence of the golden ratio in the Quran. We have observed the golden ratio in this way at the beginning of the Quran. But what if we look at the Quran in reverse? Let's start counting in reverse the number 70.45, which we found by dividing 114 surahs. Considering the last surah, Nas, as the first surah, let's count backward. When we go back from the 114th surah, we come across the Surah Kasai. Surah Kasai is the 70th surah from the end, but the 45th surah from the beginning. This again brings us to the golden ratio. Could the number 70.45 have a significant meaning in the Quran? What if the Quran had a different number of surahs instead of 114? Would the result be the same? For instance, if the Quran had 115 or 113 surahs, what would happen? When we divide 115 by 1.618, we get 71.05, and when we divide 113 by 1.618, we get 69.83, which are meaningless numbers in terms of proportion. Examining the numbers, we see that only when we divide 114 by 1.618 do we get the number 70.45, which corresponds to the 70th surah Kasai from the end and the 45th surah, Qasiyah, from the beginning. We leave it to your discretion to decide whether this is a coincidence or a deliberate design. Another of our investigations has been completed, and we are continuing to unravel the mysteries of the world.